Should.
Sikyong Penpa Tsering London Shinget Sangman Sabshude Samdi Dashdilishe. Welcome everyone to our Sikyong Penpa Tsering event. I think we're all very honored to have our President of the Central Tibetan Administration here today, not only to give us a talk, but also the opportunity to have a question and answer session. Now, I know you're very excited for this to go ahead. Briefly before this starts, so I'm Nara Hamo, the coordinator of VTAG UK, which is Voluntary Tibet Advocacy Group. I was asked to prepare a very brief presentation. It's mainly photos, so I hope you'll all enjoy and understand the importance of advocacy and see some of the amazing work that our youth here have done in the UK. I'll just get the slides. Oh yeah. So VTAG, or Voluntary Tibet Advocacy Group, in Tibetan is called Tanglang Pudin Shudu. And what is VTAG? So it's a network rather than an organization, and the mission of this VTAG is Tibetans for Tibet. It's an opportunity for Tibetans worldwide to advocate for Tibet, and the idea is to empower the youth through upskilling and providing experience. And it was initiated by the 16th Kashak of the CTA in 2021. Now, this is a network where, regardless of your political views, be it Rangzin or Umelan or any other ideologies, as long as you are motivated to do something for the Tibetan cause, the idea is we all work together to make as much success as possible. Very briefly, there is a slight difference between advocacy and activism. Advocacy is more when you are targeting the decision makers to make changes. So that can be politicians or leaders, versus activism is more of the groundwork where you organize protests and get everyone together to raise awareness of a cause. They're both linked. VTAG's aim is obviously more advocacy, as it's in the name, but you can't have one without the other. Now, in the UK, we introduced VTAG in Mangso-Dechin Democracy Day in 2023, and since then we've done multiple different things. So we've worked really well together with our other Tibet support groups like Free Tibet, International Tibet Network, with our Tibetan community in Britain, and also with our other young Tibetan groups like SFT London and LSE Tibet Society. So we've done multiple different workshops, had really skilled people teach us about different ways to advocate to leaders. We had a very successful March 10th Lobby Week in 2024, where we had the meeting with the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Tibet. We had a panel discussion on why Tibet matters. We obviously had a big uprising day, and we also had some workshops for the youth as well. In terms of the youth forum, 3 of us were very privileged to attend last year, and we got to meet with other young Tibetans from around the world, connect, share ideas, and sort of make a collaborative approach to doing our best together for the Tibetan movement. Then when we came back, we really thought, okay, we need to get more of our young people involved. And I'm really glad to say so many of you have been. And we've also been very active on social media, doing infographics and reels on Women's Uprising Day, Nobel Peace Prize, on the closure of the renowned Jigme School, and then also targeted reels to different MPs like our Foreign Secretaries, David Lammy. In terms of another big drive we did, we worked with Free Tibet to do a social media drive to get people to send out letters to the MPs to get them to stand up for Tibet, and we had a very successful turnout, and we had some MPs write back to us, which was really helpful. We've also done multiple meetings with the help of our Office of Tibet London team. We were able to have our all-party parliamentary group meetings, meet the Foreign Affairs Committee, and also meet different MPs. We also try to be a little bit more socialized, because through connections and friendship we can do our work better. So these are just some socializings we've done. We've done some bigger workshops again with collaboration with organizations like Free Tibet, where we did one on China's interference with His Holiness Reincarnation. And from that, we actually launched our VTAG UK's Gratitude to His Holiness series as well, where we've been making videos about what His Holiness means to us as Tibetans. Then we had the Transnational Repression Workshop by the Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy. And then we've also had recently a big workshop with Office of Tibet London with Mr. Dinzigungala, who's the secretary. And it was a youth upskilling, as well as planning for His Holiness's 90th birthday and the Year of Compassion, and what we as youth can do to really celebrate this important year for His Holiness. We've also made sure to attend Europe-wide conferences and the Europe-wide March 10. Again, a good place to show that we all are working together and meet new people and share ideas. And then one of the big things we worked on as well was Tuku Hungu Rinpoche's unfortunate and suspicious passing, where we again went to the Vietnamese embassy, did our protests and made infographics. And then finally, we've done quite a few different panel discussions. So we've done it in LSE, thanks to the help of LSE Tibet Society. We've done the panel discussion on Tibet, the naming of it, on the reincarnation, and also on His Holiness's new book, Voice for the Voiceless. And then finally, we've been working on a VTAG global letter drive, where we've been getting letters from MPs, from the Tibetan community, from our children, and you can see there's a range of different letters from different demographics here as well. And finally, one of our ongoing campaigns, which we're working with all the Tibet support groups really well together, is the Mega Embassy. That's where they want to move to Tower Hamlets and open the biggest embassy in the UK. We've been continuously working on this throughout the season, so you can see different times of the year. And that's one of the other things we're really working on. So, because I know we all need to move on and have our talk with Sikyong, that's it from me. I just want to take this opportunity in front of our Sikyong now to formally thank you all for all the hard work you've done in the past couple of years. Really, really appreciate it. I hope we can all continue to work hard together. And for anyone who's sort of more new to the movement or new to doing Tibet-related activities, I hope you join us. Thank you. Kizite. Okay, so I would now like to move on to introducing Namgye Samuelsla. He has been an absolute amazing member of the team. He's not only obviously a VTAG member, but more importantly, he's the youth coordinator of the UK. He's the president of LSE Tibet Society. He's the president of SFT London, sorry. And there's probably some other things that I'm missing off as well. He's worked really, really hard, and he's the main force behind being able to arrange this event with our Sikyong here today. So, Namgye Samuelsla.
Hi. Hi, everyone. This is just a primer. Thank you for the really kind words. Too generous. And I should mention, Kuntang Tepo is the General Secretary of LSE Tibet Society. Probably should have put my glasses back on. Yeah, in the back is the treasurer, so it's not just me, and every event needs to go through them, so thanks to those two as well. Appreciate it, guys. And before I just allow the Sikyong to speak, the only benefit of turning up to these events in person really is to ask questions. You can see 3 cameras, 1, 2, 3, some phones as well, so everyone can watch this anytime. And I think maybe most of you have already watched a video or 2 of Sikyong. I myself have watched quite a few on YouTube. And you can hear the voice completely well. You get the presence of being in there, except you can't ask a question. So, my question to you is, have you got one? Maybe not, and that's fine, don't worry. But, give it some thought, and I'd love for you to speak up. So, I'll pass over now, but thanks, guys.
Okay. 성원 표고에 곧 수고말 와. 인지. Yeah, yeah. So when was the last time I came to UK? Any ideas?
2023.
2023. Wow. That was my first visit or second visit? I don't remember. Anyway, thank you, Tarala and Namgyala, for the introduction and for your leadership. My mind is a little bit. Because yesterday the flight got cancelled from Dharamsala, so we had to drive 9 hours from Dharamsala to Delhi, and then the Delhi-London flight got delayed by 4-5 hours, and then it had to take a reroute because of the India-Pakistan problem. Pakistan airspace is closed now with Israel, Iran, so the whole of Middle East airspace is closed, so they have to take a reroute and it took more than 10 hours to reach here, and then another 2 hours to reach here from the airport. So we're coming directly from the airport. We thought it'll be quite late if we go to the hotel, check in, and then come here, then you will have to wait for too long. So we didn't wanted that to happen, but unfortunately there was a lot of traffic, and there was protest this morning from Israel side, Palestine side, so even the car could not reach here. So that is the brief introduction of our visit here. So it's so good to meet all of you. Of course, I keep saying it has been 65 years since we came to exile, or almost 66 years, counting from 1959. And in these 65, 66 years, the first generation that came from Tibet worked really hard, even though all of them were not as educated as we are today. Those days, you can imagine the ordinary Tibetans coming from all 3 provinces of Tibet. If you have not studied in a monastery, or if you are not a civil servant, family that belongs to providing civil service to the Kande Phorang government or the Dalai Lama government of those days, there are not many Tibetans who are really literate. But despite that handicap, despite not being educated, they followed His Holiness with their heart, with their mind, and then they worked really hard to get us going. And because of their effort, they created us, our generation. Now my generation, Nangula, you were born in India, right? So we were all born in India. I'm close to 60. And now it is our generation that is governing the Central Tibetan administration in Dharamsala. So most of the Tibetans who came from inside Tibet have retired or are no more with us. So the responsibility now lies with us, and in future it lies with all of you. So if it is not you who will take up the responsibility, then there will be no one else to take that responsibility. So you should understand that you are a Tibetan. You should feel proud of being a Tibetan, and understand the basics of Tibetan. Unless you understand the basics, you will not be in a position to explain to other people what Tibet is all about. So I don't know how many, Namgyala had been to Dharamsala, Tarala had been, how many others have been to Dharamsala? Oh, I don't know. So maybe I'll not take too much time to cover the basics, and maybe we'll leave more time for interaction. So this PowerPoint presentation I carry with me is very basic. Now if you want to study more about Tibet, then of course there are a lot more things that we can study. So the 3 things that we talked about, the importance of Tibet, not only for Tibetans, but globally, is the geopolitical importance of Tibet. So when we talk about the geopolitical importance of Tibet, then again in this map you can see Tibet is in the center of Asia. It's in the middle of Asia. And Tibet has been the political buffer between the 2 most populous nations in the world. Of course, China and India. What is China and India today, it was not the same centuries ago, right? So everybody has been evolving, but Tibet lies in the middle of the 2 most populous nations in the world, and Tibet being located in the center of Asia points towards its geopolitical significance. Now, we believe that if there could be a non-violent, mutually beneficial, negotiated solution for the Sino-Tibet conflict or dispute, then there could be more peace in the whole region. If you understand geopolitics, India, Pakistan and China enjoys what they call as all-weather friendship. And Chinese have very nice expressions, higher than the sky, deeper than the ocean, sweeter than honey kind of relationship between Pakistan and China. And the main reason for Pakistan to have this relationship with China, to have this relationship with Pakistan is to contain India. So they have been doing it for many decades, and now India is rising. Okay? So geopolitical significance of Tibet, and then the environmental importance of Tibet. So this we can cover later. And then the third is the importance of Tibetan Buddhist culture. So Tibetan Buddhist culture is based on non-violence, on compassion, and that has the potential to spread a lot more peace in this world. As we speak, there are some more than 50, 60 violent conflicts going around in this world, and some new violent conflicts are rising in Asia. Now we are talking about Cambodia and Thailand border issues. Burma issue has been going on for a long time, a lot of violence going on there. So let me just briefly take you through this. How we call our own land by the Tibetans. There are ancient names for Tibet, but in our prayer, right, for the long life of the 14th Dalai Lama, we always recite this first line. This is the Khangri Rave Koeshin Khandir. So we define our own land as the heavenly abode, the land surrounded by snow mountain ranges. Right. So I'll just briefly go. If you look at this satellite image, you can see how high Tibet is. This picture is taken from the Indian Ocean, right? This shows the elevation of Tibet. Yeah. Now, it's not just enough to say Tibet is a land surrounded by snow mountain ranges. So how is it surrounded by snow mountain ranges? So you have Himalayas in the south, you have the Karakoram in the west, the Kunlun in the north, and so many mountain ranges, mountains and valleys all across Tibet. That is why Tibet is called the land surrounded by snow mountain ranges. Then Westerners started coming into Tibet. The Britishers came, I think, very late in 18th century. The first Scottish person to come to Tibet was Charles Bogle, or Bogle, I don't know the pronunciation, but he's Scottish, and he came to Tibet in 1774. Last year was the 250th anniversary of the first visit by a Scottish to Tibet. But before that, there have been French, there have been Italians, there have been Portuguese. In fact, Portuguese was the first European to come to Tibet way back in 1626. Most of them were Jesuits, missionaries who considered Tibet as the last frontier where Christianity could not spread. So there have also been a Scottish lady from UK who came to Tibet around very late 20th century, 19th century, 1890s. One Scottish nun came to Tibet. She traveled by herself to Tibet. You can read, I can give you the name, you can read her memoir about her visit to Tibet. So here when the Westerners started coming to Tibet, then they started calling Tibet the roof of the world. Now again, why the roof of the world? I read one book by a missionary who was posted on Tibet-China border, one of the China missions. And he wrote a book, this person wrote a book in 1906 called The Frontier Outpost, and he had titled one of his chapters as Roof of the World. Maybe Tibet came to be known as Roof of the World from that time, or maybe even earlier, which I'm not aware of. But the reason for calling Tibet Roof of the World is because of its elevation, because of its altitude. Tibet is the highest plateau on Earth, according to NASA. And the average elevation is about 4,880 meters, or 16,010 feet. So when I travel around the world, I speak to universities, colleges, schools, and I asked them, like in Japan, I asked them, which is your highest mountain? And they say Mount Fuji. Now how high? 3,700, 3,800 meters. So just to give them an imagination of how high Tibet is, so I tell them that's like base camp in Tibet. The highest mountain in Japan or the highest mountain in New Zealand, the Mount Cook, is like base camp. So you start climbing from there, right, over about 3,700 feet. And according to NASA, it's the highest plateau on Earth, and it's a home to Mount Everest, 8,848 meters, which is the highest mountain in the world. And Tibet, one time a journalist asked me, which is bigger, Tibet or Bhutan? You need 100 Bhutans to make one Tibet, right? You need, I think, at least 10 times. Tibet is at least 10 times the size of UK. So Tibet is very big. It has an average area of 2.5 million square kilometers. And China's total land mass is 9.7 million square kilometers. So it's about 25% of China's total land mass, right? And now how did the Tibetan plateau came up? How did the Tibetan plateau become the highest plateau on the earth? That's about 50 million years ago, when the tectonic shift, when the Gondwanas joined with the Eurasian plate, and the Gondwanas, the Indian plate, went under the Eurasian plate. Just like the same thing is happening with Africa and Europe also. Last time when I was in Italy, there were some geologists who were trying to explain to me that the African continent is going under the European plate. So those seismic shifts are still happening, but this is one of the bigger ones. And scientists say that the Himalayas is growing by 10 millimeter every year. That's noodle thick. And the Tupa is growing every year because of the tectonic shift. The reason why I say this is because then the whole plateau, there are fault lines. And because of the ongoing tectonic shift, the whole area is very seismic zone. And a lot of earthquakes happen. In the last few months alone, there were quite a number of earthquakes from Africa, from Afghanistan, where the Himalayas start, through India, Nepal, Bhutan, and then goes up to Burma, right? Then human habitation on the Tibetan plateau, according to scientists, they say it's almost 30,000 years ago, human beings started settling there. But that is based on the finding they have right now. But if they find something older than that, then of course they'll have to revise scientific results. And today, the Chinese environmental scientists, in fact, the name third pole for Tibet was given way back in 1932 or so by another person, but it was not widely used. Now it has gained prominence. So the environmental scientists from China also call Tibet third pole. Now again, why Tibet is the third pole? So aside from the Arctic and the Antarctic, Tibet has the largest amount of glaciers and permafrost that feeds all these major rivers in Asia. Okay, so this is a map of permafrost and ground ice that are there in Tibet, and Tibet has the largest freshwater source in the world. So why, again, the third pole is the largest reservoir of glaciers and permafrost outside the Arctic and Antarctic. Then there are about 46,000 glaciers in Tibet, and it's melting very fast. So the melting of ice on the Tibetan plateau is twice the speed of normal melting in other areas, but it's 3 times on the Arctics. It holds about 46,000 glaciers according to the United Nations Environment Program. It holds about 14,500 cubic kilometer of glacial ice. That is according to the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and it's crucial for global climate regulation. So there are many aspects that you can study more in detail about how Tibet's environment impacts. Tibet is also called as the rain regulator, climate controller, because if you look at the impact of the jet streams that flow over the Tibetan plateau and its impact all over, and then also combining with the effect of El Nino, warming up of Pacific. And this is one of the, 2 years ago, October, I was in Brazil, just before going to Brazil, I read a scientific journal which pointed to this research done by some climatologists over several decades of impact on the Amazonia, which is the lung of the world, because they're on the polar side of the world, right? Amazonia is on this side of the world, Tibet is on the other side of the world, but there is a correlation between Amazonia. When there's more rain in Amazonia, there's less snow in Tibet. And when there's more snow in Tibet, there's less rain in Amazonia. So Amazonia being the lung of the world and Tibet being the roof of the world. This is what they found. And then now Asians refer to Tibet as the water tower of Asia. That's the reason why Tibet is so important environmentally, not only for Tibet, but for the whole region. If you look at this river, this originates from Tibet and goes into China. This yellow river, it's called as Huanghe in Chinese. And this is one of the longest river in China. And then you have the Yangtze, or the Jishu. This is Jishu, you can see the names here also. Now Jishu is the longest river in China. And without these two rivers, China cannot support its 1.4 billion people. These are two lifelines of China. And in fact, on the Huanghe, on the Yellow River is the cradle of Chinese civilization. Similarly, on the western side, if you look at the Indus and Satish, which originates from Tibet, goes into India, and then goes into Pakistan. Again, another civilization called Indus Valley civilization was cradled there. So two of the oldest civilizations in the world were cradled on the rivers that originate from Tibet. And then you have the Mekong. This river, Mekong, that goes into 5 different Southeast Asian countries. Goes into Laos, Burma, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. 5 different countries. Then you have the Irrawaddy going into Burma, the Sabine and the Irrawaddy going into Burma. Then you have the Brahmaputra, which starts from western Tibet, goes to eastern Tibet, and then takes a U-turn to come into India. Now, this place is called the Great Bend, when the Brahmaputra takes a U-turn to come into India. And in Tibet, it's Pemaku, suggestion, Pemaku, Metos, suggestion, Meto County. Now China is building a mega dam. It was announced only on 24th of December last year that they are building a mega dam which will produce 2.8 times the hydroelectricity than the biggest dam in the world, which is Three Gorges Dam, again in China. Right? So this is going to produce that much energy. Now, if you think about the volume of energy that it's going to produce, then you can imagine how much water needs to be inundated upstream. They need to store water to produce that much of hydroelectricity. And you need to store kilometers and kilometers of water upstream, which will destroy human habitation if there is any in that region, and then destroy the very unique flora and fauna that are very unique to the Tibetan ecosystem. Right? And then you have Karnali going into Nepal, the Ganges, the Yamuna, originating from the Indo-Tibetan border. So Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Burma, Laos, Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, and China. Tibetan rivers go into 10 different countries. And the countries that I've mentioned are some of the most densely populated areas in this world. And some estimate that between 1.8 billion to 2 billion people out of the 8 billion people in this world have something or the other, direct or indirect, to do with rivers that originate from Tibet. Now, unfortunately, China does not share any hydrological data with any of its downstream countries. Forget about water sharing agreement with any of the countries. But China is building multiple dams on all the rivers that originate from Tibet, goes into China, and then the other rivers that goes into other downstream countries are international waters. Right? But China has total disregard for downstream countries. Now you can see the impact of China damming up. When there's too much water, China uses Tibet like a water tap. If there is excess, they let it flow. You have flood, they let it flow. You have flood downstream. If there is shortage, they cut it off. Then you have drought downstream. So a lot of people's livelihoods are changing because of China's behavior on Tibetan water system. And then some say that Third World War could happen because of water. If that is the case, then Tibet is a huge bio hotspot, where it will be highly contested. Then, yeah, this is just a brief about what I already said. 10 major Asian river systems into 10 major countries, impact livelihood of about 2 billion people, which is about 24.69% of the whole world population. It's very critical to global food and water security. So these subjects you will learn more and more as you keep studying. Because water security and food security are going to be major issues in the years to come. And then you have, it's also called the rainmaker, because Tibetan Plateau, because of the jet streams that flow over the Tibetan Plateau into sites which are going to be the hotspots in India and the surrounding neighboring countries of Tibet. And then the depression sets in, and then all these impact of more rain coming in happens. That's why Tibet is also called as the rainmaker, and it also regulates climatic conditions in Europe. I mean, heat waves as one. And this is a study done by the International Campaign for Tibet on Tibet, China's damming of Tibetan rivers. Now, at least since 2000, there have been 193 hydropower dams that are planned or have been built across Tibet. But we believe that it could be more than 300 dams inside Tibet. All 193 hydropower dams are located on 6 of the rivers and tributaries that make up a part of the major river systems sourced from Tibet, and many more dams exist that have not been found or corroborated. So these different colors point towards what has been built, what is under construction, and what are being planned, right? So China wants to control all resources, including water, because China is the factory of the world. It produces 30% of world production, and now, of course, a lot of things are happening with tariff and all that, so we'll have to watch what those impacts would be. This is just to give you an overview of Tibetan history, because China claims that Tibet has been part of China since ancient times, right? The very reason why I'm here this time is to convince the all-party parliamentary group of Tibet here in the Westminster Parliament and the Foreign Office to see whether they can reverse or right the wrong of what they did in 2008. Because the British government is one of the very few governments who really had contact with the Tibetans, who understand Tibetan history. But despite all that, they changed their position in 2008. Now we have to get it back on track, right? So you have the parallel. It's important to do comparative historical studies when China claims that Tibet has been part of China since ancient times, and China is on very thin ice when it comes to history. So when China says ancient times, they don't know themselves exactly what they might mean by it. Sometimes they say time immemorial. So when is time immemorial, right? So at one point they were saying Tibet became part of China because the Tibetan emperor, Songtsen Gampo, in the 7th century had a Chinese consort. So if that is the logic of China's claim over Tibet, then the same emperor had a Nepalese wife, Rikuti Devi. So Nepal can also claim its sovereignty over Tibet, right? So that doesn't hold. And then it comes to 13th century. So Tibet disintegrated. Tibet was a big power between 7th and 9th century. And the Tibetans even invaded the capital of China, Xi'an, or Xiangyang these days, and dethroned the king, Chinese emperor, and put a puppet king in his place, and went even up to Samarkand. So Tibetan Empire used to extend at one point from the capital of China, Xiangyang, to present-day Samarkand in Uzbekistan. So that used to be the extent of Tibetan Empire. But of course, then Tibet disintegrated for about 400 years from 9th to 13th century. Then Mongols became a big power in Central Asia, led by Genghis Khan, at the beginning of end of 12th century, beginning of 13th century. And then Mongols also came to Tibet, and the Tibetans surrendered because Mongols were ruthless in their approach of annexation and expanding their empire. So they kill everybody. If they have to, let us say, invade UK, and they, of course, if they're coming from France, then they kill everybody in France. And by the time they reach London, everybody surrenders for fear of being mercilessly decimated. And that's how the Genghis Khan empire expanded. But the Tibetans surrendered, and we didn't suffer much. There were not much killing. Then the relation between the Mongols and the Tibetans started around mid-13th century. So Tibetans became the preceptor or teachers to the Chinese. So that's why we talk about this priest-patron relation. The Mongols were the patrons and the Tibetans were the priests. And they protect Tibet, and Tibetans give religious teachings to the Mongols. So only after Mongol and Tibet established relationship in 1271, then Kublai Khan invaded China. Okay, we had relations with the Mongols before that, and the Sikyong Penpa Tsering and Dongui Pawa, Shige Pawa. So they were the ones who ruled Tibet, and they introduced a system of political system was developed around that time. And Sakyas were ruling Tibet, the Mongols were ruling Mongolia, and they invaded China, and then it became the Yuan dynasty from 1271 to 1368. And in between, Tibet was ruled by the Saikapas. And then after the Mongols fell in China, links overthrew the Mongols, which is the Yuan dynasty. For China, Yuan dynasty is only that period when the Mongols ruled China. Okay, and so when the Mings, who are the real Chinese, overthrew the Mongols in 1368, then they ruled China from 1368 to 1644. So during those periods, we had our own history of Kamadrupa having succeeded the Sakyapats for about 100 years, then another 100 years by Rinpoche, then another 100 years by Devatangpa, for almost 300 years, almost parallel till up to 1642. So 2 years before the Qings took over the Chinese empire, Qings are not Chinese, by the way, they are Manchus. If you watch Chinese Kung Fu movies, you will find most of the protagonists are always Chinese, and the antagonists are all Manchus, which are the Qings, right? They came from northern China, much more closer to Japan. So, so we had these three hegemonies or dynasties till up to 1642, and 2 years before the Mings were overthrown by the Qings, the fifth Dalai Lama took over the temporal and spiritual leadership. You can see a difference of 2 years. That's very significant in history. Right? So from 1644 to 1911, China was ruled by the Qings, and Tibet from 1642 was ruled by fifth Dalai Lama and the successive Dalai Lamas that followed. Right? Just to give you a very brief, and the Britishers came to Tibet in 1903, 1904, led by Colonel Young Husband, right? Because they did some, Britishers were not able to contact the Tibetan leadership directly from British India to Tibet, and they were dealing on Tibet with the Chinese, starting from the Shifu Convention sometime around 1872, where there was a provision to allow a British expedition to allow into Tibet. The Chinese had signed it, but the Tibetans didn't allow this expedition, so the expedition could not happen because there was no control of China over Tibet, what Britishers assumed that to be. Then there were the treaty signed between China and UK or British India on Tibet in 1890. And then there was 1903 expedition into Tibet where Young Husband came up to Lhasa, and the 13th Dalai Lama had to flee to Mongolia, right? And then His Holiness the 13th Dalai Lama left to China and came back to Tibet only in 1909. So these are all part of the larger history where you need to read more. Because this is what I'm going to say, what I've said is very brief historical notation of what has happened in those days. But if you go into detail, I was just reading another briefing paper done by a Britisher for the Office of Tibet in terms of change of policy in 2008. So if we have to advocate with the UK government on changing the policy, getting it back on track, right the wrong, then you have to understand how to talk to British politicians about what has happened in the past and what they should be doing in future, what mistakes they have made in between, right? Because this is just to give you and those of you who have already been to Dharamsala, you have already seen Dharamsala. The Dharamsala is like a main family. So you have to understand Dharamsala to understand the Tibetan issue globally. So just to give you an overview, soon after we came to exile in 1959, His Holiness introduced democracy in 1960. So even today we celebrate 2nd of September as Democracy Day. That's because the first parliament or the Assembly of Tibetan People's Deputies gave oath of office on 2nd of September 1960. So it has already been almost now 66 years, that, 65 years since democracy was introduced. And we went through a lot of trials and tribulations and all that, but after 65 years, even an ordinary person like me can become the Sikyong and be responsible for the cause. Of course, His Holiness is very aware, and His Holiness has been a futuristic leader, a visionary in that sense, and a true democrat at heart. The reason why His Holiness adopted democracy so soon after coming to exile was his experience of having gone to China in 1954-55, met with Mao Zedong, Zhou Enlai, Hu Dei, and all those leaders of those times, but found that in the meetings there is a lot of discipline, but no freedom to speak. And then His Holiness was in India for the 2500th birth anniversary of the Buddha in 1956-57 for a few months on pilgrimage, and then also visited, His Holiness also visited the Indian Parliament, and found that even though the Indian Parliament was also very nascent at that stage, just 10 years after independence, even though it was nascent, very inexperienced, a lot of chaos, but His Holiness found that people had the freedom to speak. That's the reason why His Holiness adopted democracy in exile. So now we have our own. Now I've been traveling around the world. I've covered more than 27 countries now. I've covered some more in the times to come. And I can say for sure that we are the only exiled population with a fully functional democratic polity, thanks to the government of India, people of India, for allowing us to exist there. If it is not for the government of India, I keep saying we don't exist, right? So we have our Supreme Justice Commission, which functions like the judiciary, but we don't handle criminal cases. We handle only civil and administrative cases because we have to conform, since we live in India, we have to conform to Indian laws, right? And then we have the parliament with 45 members. Unlike other democracies where you have set constituencies, we don't have that because we don't own our land is conquered by China, occupied by China. So since we don't have our own country, as you know, Tibet was divided into 3 provinces, traditional provinces. So each of these 3 traditional provinces, irrespective of the number of territories, elect 10 members each. So you can see that the proximity of border between India and Tibet is closer to Rizang, central Tibet. So more central Tibetans could come out, less so from Kham, and still less from Amdo. So, but irrespective of the number of electorate, we elect 10 members each to signify that Tibet is a union of all the 3 provinces, not just one province. And then we have our cabinet, right? 30 members. Then we have 4 Buddhist traditions and 1 pre-Buddhist tradition on. Each of them elect 2 members. So that's 10, 30 plus 10, 40. Tibetans in Europe and Africa elect 2 members. Of course, we hardly have any Tibetans in Africa. But we have to divide the whole world wherever there are Tibetans, even if it's one. Right? And North America and South America, Tibetans elect 2 members, and Tibetans outside India, Nepal, Bhutan, the Australasia region elect 1 member, so 45 members in all. Then we have a cabinet where Sikyong's position is the elected position to lead the cabinet, and the Sikyong can nominate up to 7 ministers for 7 departments. So one department is religion and home, religion and culture. Religion and culture, we have 292 monasteries and nunneries in India and Nepal registered under the religion and culture department. Now it has gone below 40,000 monks and nuns. Earlier it used to be around 42,000. Now it has come down to 39,700. When I took over as Sikyong in 2021, 42,000 monks and nuns, 64% were Tibetans, 64% were Himalayans, and then 35% Tibetan and 1% non-Tibetan, non-Himalayan. Now today it has gone down to 39,700, and out of that, 69% are from the Himalayan region. So when you say Himalayan, Indian Himalayas, Nepalese, Bhutanese, all of them studying in Tibetan monasteries in India and Nepal, and 29% are Tibetans, 2% non-Tibetan, non-Himalayans, mostly Mongols and others. So, but we don't interfere in the education system of these monasteries because they have a centuries-old institutionalized mechanism of management and teaching, right? So, but we do take care of old, informed monks and nuns who need help. Then also this department organizes prayers for the long life of this holiness and all that. Then we have a department for home where our accountant, the new accountant here in opposite Tibet, London, was from. So the home department is responsible for rehabilitation of the 37 settlement offices we have in India alone in 10 different states and 2 union territories. So from north, east to west, to north to south, Tibetans are scattered all over in 37 locations in India, and we have to visit every one of them and take care of their rehabilitation. Then we have a department for education. We run about 61 schools right now in India and Nepal, but the student population is going down. Till 2008, we used to receive any number between 2,500 to 3,000 Tibetans every year. Most of their children left behind in India to study, not knowing whether they will ever meet their families again or not. He was only 4 years old when he had to climb over the Himalayas for them. Now, in 2008, there was widespread demonstration in the whole of Tibet, participated by people from all walks of life. This was the largest ever peaceful demonstration inside Tibet. Even the 87, 88 ones were concentrated more in the capital, Lhasa. It didn't spread much to other provinces. But 2008 was widespread, right? So since that time, Chinese control increased. They removed all the guides from Lhasa, because without guides, you cannot come. A 4-year-old cannot come by himself or herself, climbing over the Himalayas illegally, right? And sometimes you get shot, sometimes you lose your fingers or toes because of frostbite. So you have to go through a lot of difficulties to cross Tibet and come into exile and to seek political asylum in other countries. So this year, so the number of students coming from Tibet has come down drastically. When I took over in 2021, it was only 4 or 5 people coming out of Tibet. Also because pandemic was raging at that time, the COVID was raging, and even now it has not increased so much. Right? There's little increase, but not so much. So because of that, that's one reason why we have smaller number of children in our schools. All TCV schools, Tibetan Children's Religious Schools, many of them were started for newcomers from Tibet. Now, at that time, where the 1,200 students, now it has come down to 600. Right? So that's the level of decrease in the number of students that are coming out of Tibet. And then migration, all of you, right? Migration, people moving to UK, to Europe, to North America, to Australia, everywhere. We are only about 130 to 140,000 Tibetans in exile. Right? Out of that, 70,000 are in India, even today. 8,300 in Nepal, a little more than 1,000 in Bhutan. But in the last few months, Bhutanese government is giving citizenship to refugees, including Tibetans, to those who are below the age of 65, which means those who have come after 1959. So the elder ones won't get citizenship. Bhutan itself is having a lot of brain drain. A lot of the younger people are going to Australia. Last time I was in Canberra, I saw quite a lot of them. So they have a lot of problems with youth, and they want to give citizenship to refugees. Then the rest, 50, 60,000 Tibetans are scattered across the globe in some 27 different countries. Right? This you do now. When you have families moving, then they take their kids with them, so you have less children in India. And the third reason is, of course, low birth rate. It's happening everywhere. Japan is having acute problem of old age. Because now they say they're selling more old age diapers than children's diapers in Japan, because there are a lot more older people who are living very long. And in Europe also you have this problem starting from Italy. Italy has the worst problem, population problem. So these are the reasons why our schools now, when more people move out, particularly younger ones who can give birth, who can have productive labor, when they move out, then only the elderly remains in the settlement. So we have these cyclical problems of social, because of the social and demographic changes that are happening. So one of the biggest challenges for us was, how do we increase the vibrancy of these compact communities? Because of these compact communities, we managed to keep our identity alive in terms of language, culture, religion, all that, right? So we still run those schools, but since the number of students are going down, costs are increasing, and the overhead costs are increasing, so we have to find some ways to integrate the schools in future, depending on the number of students. Now we are working on statistics a lot, because if we depend on numbers, I cannot say it can be scientific, but it will be a reasonable policy and programs that we can develop based on the reality of the situation, right? So we have set up a committee to see how do we integrate these schools under different administrations, like Tibetan children's villages, homes. We have Home Foundation in Missouri, and then some of the self-schools. Those schools we have taken over from the Indian government and we run ourselves. And then we have the Department for Health, both allopathic and Tibetan medicine. Tibetan medicine is very well known. In fact, the first international conference on medicine must have happened in Tibet in the 8th century for 2 years, right? We invited medicinal practitioners from Turkey, Iran, all the neighboring countries, India, China, and we developed our own Tibetan medical system, which we practice here, and it has been recognized by the Indian government as part of the alternative medicine. So we have both of these in every Tibetan settlement, and then what else? Then Department of Security. Security mainly for His Holiness, but His Holiness security is handled by the state and the central government of India, so we don't have to worry too much. But when His Holiness gives teachings to several hundred thousands, boom kashe, then we provide our additional security. Then we have Department for Information and International Relations. We have one office in Tokyo, which is a de facto embassy in a sense. So Tokyo handles East Asia and some parts of Southeast Asia. Then we have one office in Taipei, only for Taiwan. We have one office in Canberra for Australia and New Zealand and some parts of Southeast Asia. Then we have one office in Delhi from Thailand to Middle East, but we are not able to reach beyond India. Then we have one office in Kathmandu for Nepal, one office in Moscow, which is having a problem now. Our office was raided by the Moscow authorities. So that's mainly responsible for the Shanghai Cooperation countries, which is Central Asian countries. Then we have one office here in London for Northern Europe, of course London, Iceland, the whole of Scandinavia, all three Baltic countries, and then Poland. And then we have one office in Joburg for the whole of Africa, Johannesburg, but we are not able to go beyond South Africa. Even South Africa has much more better relations with the ANC, has better relations with Chinese government today. So there's not much political space for us to operate. And then we have one office in Brussels and a smaller office in Paris, which comes under the Brussels office. So they are responsible for the European Union, and then from countries from Portugal to Spain to France to Benelux. So these are the territories under Belgium. And then we have one office in Geneva for the whole of Southern Europe, which constitutes about 23 countries under the Geneva office, and we have only 3-4 people there. So we have these issues of both financial and human resources problem. Then one office in Washington, D.C. for North America, both Canada and America. And then one office in Sao Paulo, which right now it's in Sao Paulo or Sao Paulo in Brazil, which is responsible for the whole of Latin America. So you can see our resources, how thinly stressed we are. We budget about $40 million in a year. We have a Department of Finance. So out of that, 9% comes from Tibetans, only 9%. 91% we are still begging. And most of it comes from the government of India. The second comes from the United States, but unfortunately, the foreign assistance was cut by the present administration, and I like to believe that we became a collateral damage in the process. And I spent 2 weeks at the end of April, beginning of May, to work with the US Congress, with the State Department, with the National Security Council of the White House, and to see how we can restore this funding back. Right? And then I was in Canada, went to Japan, and came back and spent 2 weeks in Dharamsala and here. So on my way back from Japan also, I met with the US Embassy. There were indications that the State Department, the present Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is pointing towards giving more responsibility of the retained USAID projects to the regional offices, which means the embassies. So we have to plug all ports, right? Make sure that everybody supports us. And fortunately, because of the leadership of His Holiness Dalai Lama, we have very good bipartisan support in the United States and also in both the houses. And Marco Rubio himself was championing the cause of Tibet when he was a senator. And today he is he's equivalent of David Lemmy here in UK, right? And David Lemmy was there speaking with Marco yesterday, I think, because of the Israel-Iran conflict that's raging now. It's going to destroy a lot of things. Okay, so this is just to give you an overview of the CPA, overview of the history of Tibet. Then I would highly recommend that you read these books. Last time, we don't have it here, right? It's in the baggage. We still haven't checked in our hotel, so the books are still in the baggage. But I would highly recommend that you read, because the policy that we have adopted after I came into this office, of course, policy is the middle way, The policy is the middle way that was adopted in Parliament a long time ago, way back in 1997. But the strategy in achieving that policy, we changed a little bit. Because when His Holiness says middle way, of course His Holiness is not asking for separation or independence of Tibet from China. Looking at the reality of the situation, because His Holiness started thinking about this policy since 1973, right? And when we say 1973, can you imagine what was happening in Tibet? 1966 to 76, there was this cultural revolution going on all over China. And they destroyed everything old, including inside Tibet by the Red Army. So those days, no Tibetans could go in, no Tibetans could come out. There was no information. So there was this worry that we may not exist as a people. So forget about independence. But we have to exist as a people, as a culture, right? So His Holiness started thinking about all this. So what we have, when His Holiness says middle way, right? Then there have to be polarities. Without polarities, they cannot be middle. So one polarity is the historical status of Tibet as an independent state. That's why I gave you an overview of the history of Tibet, right? And the other polarity is the present situation of occupied Tibet under the repressive Chinese government. So we have to find a genuine autonomy. The name autonomy is already there. China calls Tibet the Tibet Autonomous Region, Tibet Autonomous Prefecture, Tibet Autonomous County, but there is no real autonomy. That's why we are saying we need genuine autonomy. Right? So when we talk about middle way, then we talk about polarities, and if there is no recognition for these polarities, there is no meaning or value for middle way. Right? So based on that thinking, we worked for 2 years with the US Congress 122 to 24 and get this Resolve Tibet law, Resolve Tibet Act
Is this the book?
passed. Yeah, Tibet Brief 2020. This is one of the book. If you read this book, of course, before the concept of modern nation state, after the Second World War and the formation of the United Nations, there was no concept of a state that is accepted universally by all countries around the world. There have been different concepts in Asia, in Europe, in Africa, in Latin America, so on and so forth, right? So what Michael Van Wald and Meek Bothy's book does is he had worked with some 60, 70 scholars, not just from Tibet, but from countries around Tibet for over 6 years, and then came out with this book. So if you read this book, you will understand, not only understand the history of Tibet from an international legal perspective, but then also will empower you as to how Tibet has been an independent country. So what Michael did was to prove that Tibet was never part of China. Tibet was an independent country, whether it was before the concept of nation state, that's very unique to Asia, or after the concept of modern nation state, right? And the other book is a Chinese, one written by Professor Lau Han Xiang. Now, English version should be coming out pretty soon. It has been delayed for almost a year now because he's very, very meticulous. He says, I'm challenging the Chinese government and I don't want a single mistake in my book. So when you do small changes, then the whole thing changes, and then you have to do it manually to correct it, and that's why it's taking a lot of time. And what Lau Han Xiang had done was, he's a Chinese. And when he was a student in school, he remembers that the Chinese government always used to teach them, saying Tibet has been part of China since ancient times. And then when he reached university days, then he found that Chinese government is asking every other government to say Tibet is part of the leadership of China. So that intrigued him as to why, if Tibet had been part of China since ancient times, then why is the communist government asking every government to say Tibet is part of PRC, that's People's Republic of China, that was founded after in 1949, right? So that is why he spent all his life as a professor, and after his retirement he found time and he went into the Communist Party website and downloaded all the imperial Chinese historical records, if you can consider the Yuan also as Chinese and Qing also as Chinese. He took out all those and then he studied those and he wrote this book in Chinese. And it was not written in a historical format. It was written more as an argument as to how Tibet was never considered part of China by the Chinese historians themselves. Because Chinese imperial history, they are supposed to be very meticulous in maintaining historical records. When another empire comes, they revise the previous empire's history and lay it down. So they cannot now, China cannot answer for these two books. There has been no response on these two books, right? And I carry these two books with me all the time. And then of course you have His Holiness' latest book, Voice for the Voiceless. I would highly suggest that with your leadership, you organize reading club. Read one chapter, one Saturday, one Sunday. But this will give you a very precise answer as to how much His Holiness has struggled, worked hard to resolve the Sino-Tibet conflict over the last 60, 65 years. And this will also give you a very good insight about the history of Tibet and how His Holiness views Tibetan history, right? So these are very important books that you need to read. We are also offering a voice for the voiceless to all the members of parliament whom we have been meeting over the last many months. So if you read this book, then you will be empowering yourself as an advocate or as an activist to carry forward your responsibilities. And I'll close with this last word, or last one. I keep saying this because this makes a lot of sense to me. When in 2001 or 2002, when I was the director of Tibetan Parliamentary and Policy Research Center in Delhi, we organized a workshop for the youth, Tibetan youth, and the title was Responsibility of Tibetan Youth Towards Tibetan Movement. And we invited Professor Sambor Rinpoche to speak at that conference. Were you there? You were checking, you were certainly there. So Rinpoche spoke for about an hour. And in fact, I fell asleep in between also. And then, what did Rinpoche speak? He explained the two words, Lenge in Tibetan, which is the equivalent for responsibility in Tibetan, right? Lenge and responsibility, these two words, one in Tibetan, one in English. Now, when we say Lenge in Tibetan, it has to come from within you, what you want to do for your cause, right? Nobody tells you, nobody has to tell you what you need to do. So when you say responsibility, the word response, responsibility comes from somebody telling you to do something, then you respond, right? So the very meaning of these words carries the mentality of the person who speaks those words, right? So you can see the difference. Responsibility is only when you respond to somebody asking you to do something. And from Tibetan word Lenge, it has to come from within you. Nobody has to tell you what you need to do. So Rinpoche explained these two words and finally concluded by saying, I'm a Tibetan. Just as I'm speaking to you today, I'm a Tibetan. You all are Tibetan. Of course, you are British nationals now. That's a different matter. But so, for one Tibetan to tell another Tibetan what your responsibility is, Rinpoche says, that is not my responsibility to tell you what your responsibility is. So you have to feel it within you, and then you have to work towards the cause. Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Do we need the mic to be working?
Mic is not working, right?
I don't think it's not.
Okay, then.
It's okay, we can.
I think, yeah, if everyone who has a question, maybe if you stand up and then say it as loudly as possible so that we can all hear, that'd be really great. So does anyone have a question?
Question, comment, anything you want to know.
And maybe. Yes, please.
So, just started. I just wanted to ask, like, if you believe that the inclusion of, like, religious figures in government positions, how it impacts the democratic process. So, like, do you think it increases representation, or do you think, like, it causes challenges to democratic principles?
Because I engage soon, I get which come soon.
Oh, okay.
Laman do soon. Reincarnated Lama.
Of religious figures in government positions.
Yeah.
How does it impact democratic processes?
Oh, okay.
And if anyone has a question that they have right now, we can do two at a time. Otherwise, does anyone else have a question?
My question, I was going to ask you what were your hopes for the outcomes of the meeting in the APGT. You answered that, and I was just wondering what kind of your strategy was to bring up their decision in 2008 and how you hope to change this and thus this very harmful decision.
Actually, furthering on to Dashivanta's question,
Yeah.
I had a question with regards to why do you think that the UK government in 2008, with the Labour government, why did they make that switch in how, what their perspective on Tibet was, especially given that 2008 was such a big year with the demonstrations in Tibet, there was global media attention, and despite that there was this huge shift by the Labour government then. So I just wanted right and some understanding as to why that might have happened in the first place.
Jill, we can take some more questions later. First, these three questions. Religious figures, I think if I'm not wrong, maybe you are referring to religious representations in the parliament. There is this general expression within the Tibetan community saying monks have two votes, monks and nuns have two votes. That's not the case. So I have always been explaining, I explained to you about the structure of the Tibetan parliament and the composition where they come from. So right now, for the parliamentary elections, Tibetans outside India, Nepal, Bhutan in the Asia-Australasia region have only one vote. So they have only one vote, right? Tibetans in Europe, like all of you here, have only two votes. You have only two votes to elect two representatives from Europe. And then Tibetans in North America and South America have two votes, right? But the lay people in India and Nepal, lay people have 10 votes in their province. So if I'm Amdo, I can vote for 10 Amdo people, Uzang, 10 Amdo, Uzang, Khampa, 10 Khampas, like that. And then for monks and nuns, over and above these 10 votes, they have two more votes for their religious tradition, right? So you have one person, one vote, one person, two votes, one person, 10 votes, and one person, 12 votes. And if you look at the difference from 1 to 12, that's 1,100% difference in the right to choose your leader, right? So in that sense, I have always been saying that we need to adapt to the reality of the situation. If we are not able to adapt to the reality of the situation, then what will happen is there will be a lot of questions on the legitimacy of the Central Tibetan administration, and then also relevance of the Central Tibetan. If people don't trust the parliament, then what do you do? It doesn't make sense to have a parliament, right? So I keep saying that we have to be pragmatic, we have to adapt to the reality of the situation, all the social and demographic change that we are going through, that I've been speaking about. Tibetans now, only 70,000 Tibetans in India and 8,300 Tibetans in Nepal, which constitutes about maybe 55 to 60% of the Tibetans in exile. They elect 40 members. And the rest, 40% of the Tibetans elsewhere around the world, elect only 5 members. So that itself is unequal in many sense. So this needs to be corrected. But right now, if you look at the sentiment of the House or the sense of the House, it doesn't look like it's going to happen very soon. So that needs to be continuously reminded and forge your relationship with your elected members also. When you have a UK member or a member from Europe, then you have to ask them to speak about these topics from time to time to see how much changes we can bring in based on reality. But then another question that's connected to religious figures, of course, where after His Holiness devolved all his political and administrative responsibilities in 2011, then there were a lot of talk about Tibetan community also having separated church and the state and all that. Because the fallacy in this thinking is the medieval period Europe, where they think about the setup, of medieval Europe, where you have slavery and all those kind of things. So where the religious figures became very, very powerful. That's not exactly the same case with Tibet. So when His Holiness was asked about whether the new development in 2011 is a separation of church and state, His Holiness didn't answer directly to that, but His Holiness always said, a political person, if driven by religious values, then that political person will be a good politician. If you are not driven by values, of religious values, then you do whatever you think is right for that moment, and you disregard a lot of sentiments and emotions. So that is why even in my case, now being the Sikyong, before I go to sleep, I remind myself as to what right things I did during the day, or what wrong things did I do during the day, and how do I amend myself. in the days to come. So every single day you have to remind yourself as to what you are doing, whether you are being the person that people have entrusted you to, fulfill the responsibilities. Now, APPGT, first we were a little worried after the last elections whether we would be able to form this all-party parliamentary group for Tibet because there are too many APPGs. And the British government decided to lessen the number of all-party parliamentary groups, at least have 20 members to support and 4 active members, 4 officers. So fortunately, we managed to get this done. So thanks to all of you and the Office of Tibet for getting the APPG back on track, because otherwise we were also worried about the intergroup in European Parliament. There were a lot of issues happening in the European Parliament. There was Qatar Gate, because of which they want to reduce the number of groups such as Tibet Intergroup and others. Even in UK also we face the same problem, but right now, last time when we had the World Parliamentarians Convention on Tibet in Japan, there was Chris Law from the Scottish from Scotland, and he is also one among the members of the APPG. So now I'm not a historian. I didn't go too deep into why all this happened, but you can see that 2008 was a crucial year for China. Since 2000, 2001, they have been preparing for this. Their coming out party, the Olympics, which was a huge coming out party for China to showcase to the world that now they are a big power, right? So as a consequence of all those things also, the relations between United States and China, which is now at loggerheads with trade, tariff and all that, started from there in 2001 when US signed free trade agreement with China. And China was also included in the World Trade Organization, right? And then, so all these things started evolving from there. And then I'm sure there must have been a lot of pressure from the Chinese government on the British government. And then most of those countries, even as a speaker, I've traveled around the world, but those days, not many were willing to listen to us. Right? In 2008, it was the same thing. The British government must have been looking for more trade with China that benefits them more, because that's also the reason why I keep repeating this statement that we have to take realities into consideration. One reality is, through the middle way, if we have to seek a negotiated, mutually beneficial solution for the Sino-Tibet conflict, then there is no other way than by reaching out to the Chinese government, because no other government can give us that, right? And till such a time, we have to reach out to the international community, including UK. But we can't expect UK to leave aside their national interests for the interests of Tibet. That will never happen. So understanding these two concepts will keep our expectations realistic, right? So I'm sure first business consideration, then, and you also have to understand the Sino-Tibet conflict. The reason why I keep using this term, Sino-Tibet conflict, Sino-Tibet dispute, is to give right status to the Sino-Tibet continuing problems, right? So if you say Tibet issue, an issue can be small, between 2 people, 2 households, 2 communities, and go up to bigger issues. But if you give the name Sino-Tibet conflict or Sino-Tibet dispute, which we managed to do it in the Resolve Tibet Act of 2024, then it gives the right status to the conflict. Now, I've been reading these documents. I still have some more documents to read as to how we can convince the all-party parliamentary group for Tibet to take up this cause. So this will happen on Monday, and if you keep watch, then you will know what we are going to say, right? But basically focus on history, history as a tool here. Of course, we have a central Tibetan administration, we have a government in exile, we have to follow laws on all that, but sometimes we behave like independent countries. The representatives behave like representatives of independent countries. We are not. Our country is occupied by China, right? So we are a people who are struggling to get back our freedom. So in which case we should be more unified. But then talking to other freedom fighters around the world, like the Baltic countries, our friends there, they were also saying, till we got independence, we were very unified, very united. But the day we got independence, we started fighting. But we Tibetans are fighting even before we get our freedom. That's the sad part, right? But then differences of opinion are natural. I always say there are 8 billion people in this world. We have a Tibetan saying, right? Mi sumjul, sam sumjul, zo sumjul, raja tujus lagi arwa. 30 humans, 30 brains, 30 zo, 60 horns. If you apply that to a larger level, there are 8 billion people in this world. You won't find the same Namgye. If you go looking for another Namgye in this world, you won't find exactly the same Namgye physically. No. For that matter, any of us. So similarly, you have 8 billion different minds. Even twins who are born just few seconds after each other or few minutes after each other, not the same, will never be the same. So your mind is, as a Buddhist, then of course we can talk about our previous lives and how it influenced this life. But even not being a Buddhist, from the time you were born to a family, to the environment that you grew up, to the school and the communities and the colleges, and all that you went through, it's different. Everybody has a different experience. Everybody has a different understanding. So differences of opinion is not a big issue. I take it in our stride. That's why we should not, any view that is different from yours need not be considered as against you all the time, right? But then again, his question is very pertinent because we are struggling for freedom. We don't have our independence. We don't have our country right now controlled by us. So in which case we should be more united. That's why I keep telling the younger generation, don't talk about it. There's all these chokasum, chugyu and all this happens with the elder generation. Let us not get involved into this. Let us think holistic, right? Not be narrow-minded in our thinking. When you become very narrow-minded, then you start infighting. You start looking at all the small problems, even without problems also, even if there is no problem also, people like to come out with insinuations and all that. That's why Tibetan community is becoming gossip-mongering community. And the reason why our community is becoming gossip-mongering is because the people are not educated enough. Even in UK, I keep saying, British people read newspapers every day, right? To keep yourself updated about what's happening in your country. But as people who are struggling, we should be studying more about what's happening in China, what's happening in Tibet. Are we doing enough of that? Or are we in a position to understand the functioning of the CTA as we should be? It's not there. That's why we have to keep traveling. Now His Holiness is becoming 90 this year, 90th birthday. And His Holiness is not able to travel as much as he used to do before. So it's now the responsibility lies on us to reach out to the Tibetan population. So physically we are becoming distant, but emotionally we need to be close. That's why I promise my people that I will visit 2 times in 5 years. And this is my 2nd visit, and tomorrow I'll be speaking to the public for the 2nd time in UK. And even 2 times, even visiting 2 times is very difficult. I'm still managing a lot of things, and I travel about 5, 6, 7 months a year all around, but still not enough. So today we are here, tomorrow, day after we are here, then 2 days in Germany, then I'm back in Dharamsala, then we have the 90th birthday coming up. So this is a very good, I just dinalola thandasta shira mamushra shen choy ma samolo hanko yorwa in samala ani because the chuma digeti younger ones don't get into all this. divisions. Right? I have personally taken a pledge that I will not take part in any activity that will divide the community more. But then again, democracy itself is divisive by nature because you can vote for only one person. Right? So if people understand the norms of democracy, then during the election, whatever happens, happens. But once the election is over, then of course you have the responsibility to oversee your elected representatives. But otherwise, to create unnecessary problem is detrimental to our cause. Right? Yeah.
Just go. What
Can I just say, we
No,
only
I'm
have
fine.
a few minutes left, so last couple of questions, please. Can they be from the youth, since it's the youth event?
Yeah. 피기를 누구요? 나도 내일 팽개요 말해. 팽개를 세우 배 거울에. 펀딩 나라. I think I mentioned very briefly about the budget when we talked a little bit about the finance department. We budget about 40 million US dollar, roughly 40 million US dollar. Out of 14 comes from the United States, which is about 35% of our budget. And we managed to get back the 2 million PRM funding. PRM meaning Population, Refugees and Migration, which is one section in the State Department of the United States government. And that is 2 million. So 2 million is about 5%. So we are short 30% right now. So this is the present condition. But fortunately for us, right now we are in the best financial situation. We managed to increase our general fund. We managed to double our general fund from 2018-19 to 23-24. And right now we are spending maximum money since we came into exile on welfare issues. So, of course, we need to diversify. That's why I'm traveling around towards the United States, Canada, Japan, elsewhere, today here, tomorrow there. So we'll also speak with the British Foreign Ministry how much, or if they are in any position to help us. This could be one of your asks when you advocate to the British government to fund Tibetans since there have been a funding cut from the US.
Lisa.
So I think we are going to conclude the session for today. I'd like to once again thank our partners, LSE Tibet Society, Tibetan Community Britain, VTAG for being able to organise this event and giving us, the Tibetan youth, to have a chance to not only hear from our Sikyong but also engage, ask questions. And I think not only the geopolitical situation of Tibet but also the history, it was very enlightening to us, and also actually it was very interesting to hear what the current state of the Tibetan community in exile is and what is actually realistic and what isn't. So that was really, really eye-opening for all of us. I think think many of our youth here will take into account what you've advised with regards to reading up more about the Tibetan cause. Also, there's another example of Lingge that you shared from Sandra, which is talk that you've previously been part of. I think that's something we all need to remember is our collective responsibility. I really like understanding the deeper meaning to Lingge, and I think that's something that will all sit in our hearts. So on behalf of all of the Tibetan youth in the UK, I'd like to once again thank you, Sikyong Penpa Tsering, for all of the advice today.